Hello, welcome back to our channel, the series about data engineering and data science within Microsoft Fabric. Today, Qixiao is joining us to discuss Spark job definition in Fabric. Hey, Qixiao.
Hey, Estera, thanks for having me again. Great to join this episode.
Yeah, it's great to have you here as we want to discuss and we want to answer some questions. So remember, those who are watching us, you can always put a question, put a suggestion, because one of the question, let me read it, was from one of the viewers. Haven't found at least one complete guide how to use and make working reference file in Spark Job. It can be very useful. And we are here today to discuss and to see the demo, how to make it working.
Yeah, I mean, again, first of all, thanks for the feedbacks. Obviously, I think we should do a better jobs in our documentations. I mean, that's for the action item we need to take. But again, for the spot job definitions, I think in the current design or experience, we do have a certain scenario that we can support the user to kind of the upload multiple PY modules into the SADs, and inside your main definition file, basically your main PY files, you can import that modules into your main definitions and consume whatever the functions or variables or constants you have defined in that reference modules. I can quickly walk through a quick demo later on, but again, that scenario has been kind of the supported in the current design or experience.
Is that somehow connected with MS Spark utils, or the library is just not connected at all with that functionality?
No, that's is a separate thing. So again, for the ML Spy Utils, I know that for a lot of notebook users, it's kind of the very useful modules and use them a lot. So that's why in the certain use cases or certain APIs, actually it really depends on the notebook services. So in that case, I don't think we have a fully support kind of the APIs inside SADs that you can use from the MS Spy Util. That's a different topic. But for the scenario we just mentioned that, for example, if you imagine I have one PY file as main definition files, I might have other several dependent modules that I was written inside a different PY files. So in that case, you can just upload these additional PY files into the SADs, and from the main definition file, you can still consume that PY module as a kind of the third party libraries per se, something like that. Yeah.
Got it. So is it the time for demo? Because again, based on the example, we can just, I believe that we can learn the biggest value.
So yeah, just quickly take a step back to recap what SAD is, meaning that using SADs, user can basically pick the different language. For example, right now we already support Spark, Scala, Java, and also R. Once the language is selected, the user just basically upload a different source file. In the case of the PY, or if it's a Java, it's the Java files. So in this particular setups, I have one main definition files that is basically just trying to read CSV files from the attached or associated default lakehouse and do a conversion to the delta. That's basically a very simple sample, just to recap what the SAD can do. And also you notice that there's a reference files. So basically this is what I mean by, hey, if for this particular main definition files, if I need to reference further other PY file modules, I can click the upload here to upload the reference files. I already have a different setup here. For example, for this one. So in these setups, you can see I already, maybe the quickest easy thing is you can just download the source files. And if I open this is main definition files. So you notice that in the third line, actually importing the PY module constants. And within these constants modules, actually, I'm just defining the data table names there. I basically just kind of modify the previous symbol table names from the additional or external PY modules. In this way, you see that you can, in my main definition file, actually you can import multiple or not any numbers of the PY files or PY module you like to import. And from here, you can consume that at either the functions defining in the external PY module or maybe some kind of constant as I do in these samples. So now with this one, you can actually trigger the runs, and at the execution times, basically we just post the main definition file together with the PY, together with the reference file back to the backend through the Levy. And with that, at the execution phase, the code inside the main definition file can actually locate the correct py modules and import the py module and consume theirs. So if I click the history run histories, you can notice that the table name actually is kind of retreating from the py module which defining the constant names. I think that's basically a very simple sample to indicating, hey, in the SADs, how you can upload the reference files as individual py modules or py files and consume that from the main definition files.
So to reference, we are uploading either a file or through the ADLS Gen 2, and then we are just importing the package, the module, and taking the advantage of what we packaged, what we import.
Yeah, so in the current SADs, there's two ways you can specify the main definition file, including the reference file. One is just uploading directly from a local desktop. That's what I just demoed. And the other one is we also can give user the option to say, hey, let me give you the ADL's Gen 2 path. And from there, you can retrieve the main definition file and also you can retrieve the reference files. As long as the current executor have the privilege or have the access to read that ADL Gen 2 path, then at the runtimes, we're going to grab the main definition file together with the reference files. And yeah, that's the second way you can give the runtimes or the system where to find the main definition file and also the reference file.
Got it. Out of curiosity, how Spark job definition works with Git?
Yeah, I mean, we are working on that. Actually, it's pretty very soon. We're going to announce the public preview of the Git support for SADs. So, I mean, it depends on as I mentioned in the language settings. If you pick the PySpark, basically you give us the source code of the SAD because the PY file actually is the source code. So in that case, once the Git support for SAD is landed, you can see that the PY file will be committed to the Git as the source code there for the version control. And from the repo, you can create another SADs with the same setup, meaning the same PY file, and also if any reference files are there, we create another SADs in the target workspace. But if you pick in the Java and Scala as
Yeah.
the language, you are going to upload the Java files. Java is kind of the binary; it's not really the source code. So in that case, you will give us we are not going to support the user can just upload or check in your binary, the Java files into
As
the
a
Git.
file.
It's
Yeah.
a file, yeah,
Not the
not a
code
source.
inside the binary. Yeah.
It's just the binaries. It's kind of the compiling output from the Java. So in that case, we will suggest the user, hey, user, please give us the ADL Gen 2 path. So we are treating that path as kind of the source code representation of your binary. Let me put it that way. So basically, in the Git, in the repo, the source code representation of your SADs is more like, remember, hey, where is the ADL Gen 2 path? I can grab the Java files. With that, you can basically control the source code or the source representation of SAD together with other properties in the Git. So I think that's kind of the different experience depends on the language you pick. I think most of the data engineering probably still will kind of using the Python and should be fine because the Python we are really checking the source code. You have a proper control of the version control and the proper control of the PR history based on the source code change. So that's we are not landing yet. I'm very close to announce the public preview, but that's something you can expect that for the Git support in SCD.
Super. And using PySpark will be the most convenient with that functionality. Is there anything else we should cover?
One thing, actually, there's one feedback from the users saying that, hey, when I mentioned that the P1 modules, so the Livy protocol actually is the from the line kind of the
Yes.
interface we are kind of interacting with the job services. So in the Livy protocol, there is special different kind of input, what kind of the input you can expect it or you should submit to the Livy. So for the py file, there's a dedicated hyphen py file flag indicating, hey, this is the py file I'm going to submit to the Livy. But they do have a separate flag, if I remember correct, as the hyphen files, meaning that besides the py modules or py files, if any other resource file, for example, maybe in your code, you need to consume some certain resource files. And in that case, you can just put something in a zip and using that indicating hyphen files as the way you can submit the zip files. So we already get some feedback from the user saying that, hey, besides the py file itself, in my Python code, even in my Java code, I might need to consume some other resource, but I cannot submit that because SAD doesn't provide that kind of entry
I see.
yet. So we are thinking about in the coming semester, basically the DT, shall we including that part experience inside the SADs. So what I'm trying to say is the Levy itself already support a full list of the different parameters or input you can specify, py module, py file, or just the general files. But in the SAD UX or SAD's artifact setups, we didn't provide that kind of entry yet. So I'm thinking about, given user already have some feedback there, I think we should do that in the coming semesters.
Qixiao, is there anything what you plan to work on in the upcoming months?
Yeah, we only since the launch, we do get certain feedbacks of SAD authoring experience. One particular interesting feedback is like because for SAD's underlying, we are actually leveraging the Levy protocol to submit a job to the Spark, and inside the Levy protocols, they do have a dedicated input to specify the py files. Basically, the py file match to the reference file we just mentioned in the demos. But in the Levy, they also have a dedicated input name files. And with that entry, it's basically user can submit any other resource that in your code it depends on. We do have some feedback saying the user saying, hey, I like to also leverage in that Levy input to submit some zip file, for example, zip file or even a real package to my Spark applications. We are considering that as a coming update, but we didn't decide anything yet. I think this is also a good opportunity to get some feedbacks to say, hey, is a kind of the common use cases in your scenarios, and just give us the feedbacks, and if that makes sense to you, and once we get some kind of the strong evidence from the users, we have good planning on that. I think that's one of the update I like to mention.
Qixiao, the last question from my side. Because in Spark, we can write our code with using Scala, PySpark, R, and Spark SQL. And
Yes.
you mentioned that Spark job definition is for PySpark and for binaries, Java binaries. So for Scala, Java Scala. What about Spark SQL, which is so heavily used by especially those users who are migrating from data warehouse solutions? They are capable of using T-SQL, and Spark SQL is very similar to SQL. Of course, it's not the same, but it's similar. So they can transfer their skills. So, long story short, what about SQL, Spark SQL?
Yeah, I think I need to do some clarification here. But again, I think we should do some good job to improve the message in the UX. But once you select the PySpark in the language bar, actually inside your SAD code, you can use the Spark SQL to access the lakehouse. So I know the language text test maybe is kind of a little bit confusing, but I think we should improve that, and also making sure the user understand that although you pick the PySpark, but inside your code, the Spark SQL is supported. So yeah, that's long story short. Is the SAD do support the Spark SQL? You can use the Spark SQL to assess the data. But the feedbacks we already get is that we should improve the UX in the language bar to make it clear that it's not just the PySpark, but also the Spark SQL is also supported.
Thanks for clarifying. Everyone, if you think that we should start working implementing that functionality, please leave us a comment. Remember that you always can submit your ideas on ideas.fabric.microsoft.com. But also we are reading the comments. So looking forward to see your suggestions on enhancing Spark job definition, but also Spark runtime in general.